On today's podcast, we sit down with songwriter, music publisher, and now CEO of Beat House, a new joint venture music management and publishing company with Miss Tiffany Kumar. Tiffany is such an interesting story. I read her story and immediately called her up to be on our podcast. She's somebody who started out on the creative side as a songwriter, getting signed to a major publishing deal. She then went to work for Kanye West and worked with him before he was an artist. So we talk a lot about what she learned from that. She also had the opportunity to work at Spotify, and the kinds of insights that she provides really, really interesting in terms of, her work. She then went to work for RedOne, a very, very successful songwriter out here in California. And now she's developed her new joint venture, which is a management and publishing company with Pulse Music. Insiders, are you ready? Welcome to MUBUTV's Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Ritch, Esra, and Eric Knight. Welcome back, Insiders, to another episode of the MUBUTV Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage your music career. On today's episode, we sat down with Tiffany Kumar, songwriter, publisher, and CEO of Beat House, a new joint venture music management and publishing company with Pulse Music, to discuss her career working with Kanye West before he was an artist, what she learned from her time at Spotify, the importance of developing successful relationships in the music business, push for diversity in songwriting and the music industry, and much, much more. You won't want to miss it. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Hey, Insiders. Are you looking to take your music career to the next level? Then you need to know about the Music Business Registry. The Music Business Registry is the leading music industry publisher of the most up-to-date contact information for major and independent record label A&R, music publishers, artist managers, music attorneys, music supervisors, and much, much more. The Music Business Registry is the trusted industry standard and source serving the music business community for over 28 years with the most accurate and up-to-date contact information available. Their titles include the A&R Registry, the Film and Television Music Monthly, the Music Publisher Registry, and the Music Attorney Registry. All of their publications are available in print, PDF, CSV, or online subscription. Visit them now at musicregistry.com and receive a 10% discount by using coupon code MUBUTV10 at checkout. That's musicregistry.com, coupon code MUBUTV10. When you're ready to put your music to work, musicregistry.com.
Welcome back, Insiders. This week's featured interview is with executive Tiffany Kumar. Tiffany is somebody who is a very, very interesting study for me. I found her whole story quite fascinating. She started out as a successful songwriter. She worked with Kanye West. She worked in music publishing. She was a signed writer to Universal Music Publishing. She worked at other companies. She then went on to become an entrepreneur with her own company, Beat House, which has just developed a partnership with Pulse Music. And that whole journey of, artist, writer, working with, all these great talents and the things that she's learned along the way, I thought were just so fascinating. And for any of you out there who are interested in having your own company, who are interested in developing and fostering those relationships, she has a lot to say on that. I mean, her whole thing about the importance of fostering relationships, I thought was really important. It's one of the keys to her success. She talked about it in terms of the people that she's developed those relationships with over the years. Also, what was interesting is why she chose to partner with an indie versus a major company for her new company and launching it. And again, one of the most significant things that she spoke of and that she has been an advocate for and a very big supporter of is elevating the role of women in songwriting, in the studio, and in music publishing. And that is something that she is at the forefront on and supports extensively within the music industry.
Yeah, I thought some of the points were, which you mentioned earlier about her working with an unknown at the time, Kanye West, and then working with Sean Combs with Puff Daddy, and I think he even put her in the making of the band that she was a part of. So, she comes from that major label side, and I don't think, if I recall correctly, her experience with Universal was the best in terms of, things not happening for her, and that's what made her want to jump into the independent side of things. And so I thought that those were real interesting points about this.
Absolutely. And, she did those things in New York, and then, came out here and worked for one of the very big songwriters, RedOne,
right?
Who wrote all that stuff with Lady Gaga and had massive, massive hits, Let's Dance and so forth. I mean, all of these, great records and great experiences. And it led her to develop her own company, which she's just launched. So for all of you entrepreneurs out there who are thinking about, developing a music publishing company, this is a great story. So check it out.
Absolutely. Insiders, sit back, relax, and enjoy our featured interview with Tiffany Kumar.
Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I'd like to begin. I'd like to start at the beginning with you. Do you remember when you knew that music was going to be your career path, or was that ever a conscious decision in your life?
I love that question because I think a lot of people know what they want to do from early on in their lives. But for me, it was when I was attending college and I was taking classes all over the map and applying for a bunch of different internships. And it wasn't until I met Kanye West until I knew that music was what I wanted to do.
Hi, Tiffany. This is Eric. Thanks so much for doing this for us. We really appreciate it. This leading with what you just said right now, when you were at NYU, you started your career as an intern, with an unknown artist named Kanye West, then went to work with Sean Combs, who put you in the making of the band where you were writing songs for his artists. What were those experiences like for you as a young songwriter, and what did you learn from them?
Wow. I think for me as a songwriter, what my strongest asset was really my fearlessness. I went into it not the best singer, not the best writer, not with the most experience in the studio. Like, I had just gotten my feet wet writing and recording and met Diddy, and he put me on making the band, and I was thrown into the situation and I just went in there with fearlessness.
What was Sean like to work with at that time?
I was super scared of him, but I had no reason to be. I mean, I literally hid in the studio from him. He had a recording studio in New York called Daddy's House. And there were several studio rooms, and I'd always be in the one that he wasn't in. But he was really encouraging. And now looking back on it, I think one in a million when it comes to discovering new writers and giving people a chance. Yeah,
he definitely was. I mean, that was a very, very big, strong suit of his early in his career, is that, he had an incredible ear and an incredible eye, as history has shown, for finding talent of all kinds. And that's a rare gift. It's not something that everybody has. Some people, have it maybe for one or two people in their career, but he really had that distinct quality. And it's a very interesting observation that you would, make that, because you worked with him, I believe it was in the 90s, wasn't it?
No, this was 2008 or 9.
Oh, it was much later. Oh, okay. All right. Interesting. You were then signed as a songwriter. I believe you were with Universal Music Publishing for 3 years. What was that like for you? And what did it teach you about the business and the songwriting process that's been the most beneficial to your career?
So by the time I signed the deal with Universal, I had already been on the #1 show on MTV. I was a pretty visible songwriter. I was working alongside Diddy. I'd known so many people. But like so many songwriters, it takes a long time for your royalties to come through. So I was like, all right, I definitely have to sign a deal. Diddy also offered me a deal. I knew an A&R named Jessica Rivera from my Kanye West John Legend days. And once I realized that she was at Universal, I was not signing anywhere else. And, at that time, it was really it's a check. You're writing songs anyway, and you want to keep doing that and keep being creative. And so I needed that check, and I needed to sign to Universal. And I don't know if that's a completely different story than a lot of writers.
Tiffany, you then went on to the other side, so to speak, when you went to work for Primary Wave as VP of Creative. So much of that particular job is in building relationships, not only with your own songwriters and producers, but also artist managers and, A&R executives and other music publishers. How did you go about building those relationships?
So in knowing that I wanted to be a music publisher, I identified that I wanted to work for an independent music publisher. I wanted to sink and swim with what I signed. I wanted to be able to take chances, and I wanted to learn, and I didn't want to start all the way from the bottom. So I found out about Primary Wave and cold called Larry Mestel and Justin Shukat and went into the office and was like, I want to work here and I can stand on tables for you guys and fight to get the deals that we need. At the time, they were mostly based on iconic catalogs. So Hall & Oates, Earth, Wind & Fire, Pieces of Nirvana, and that's how they were keeping the lights on, and they were killing it. And so I brought in their new writer-producer roster, like contemporary hits, like Monster with Rihanna and Eminem, and Tuan with Tinashe, and all that. And I learned so much during that process. I was able to utilize my relationships in a completely different way than I did as a songwriter, and like really felt at home as a publisher.
Did you expand a lot of your relationships at that time? Because I mean, going to work for a publisher, it's an entirely different process than when you're a writer like at Universal trying to, get your cuts and work within the company. Now you're responsible for bringing in talent. How were you, I guess, inculcating yourself into the industry to find this new fresh talent that you were bringing to Primary Wave?
So I was based in New York at this time and spent a couple years in New York with Primary Wave, and then the last year with Primary Wave in LA. I exponentially got work done in Los Angeles. I also utilize every relationship that I have. I was like back to back in meetings, like come to the office, meet with me, play me what you have. And it's really just like scouting new talent and being in the studio and spending late nights in the studio, because you never know who's going to be there. Like I might want to sign the engineer who also produces on the side. And so that's sort of the strategy that I went with.
I guess, for our audience, it sounds like you were very, very proactive in building relationships and in building your network, especially at this time when you had to bring in talent to Primary Wave. I mean, the example you just gave about the engineer and so forth, that seems to be a perfect illustration. Was this something that you were consciously doing in terms of expanding your network at that time in New York? I
mean, I just wanted to win when it came to signing, and I didn't want to leave any like stone unturned. And so I'm pretty like pragmatic when it comes to making lists. Like I'll make like spider webs of who I know. So I'll make like webs on a piece of paper and be like, here's the nucleus of who I know. Okay, this person's connected to this person. This person's connected to this person. And like I visually see it. And then I'm like, okay, I want to take a meeting with this person. And then I'll have lists of who I want to sign and start narrowing down that list. Like, okay, I love this new song. I feel like I could pitch this song to Rihanna. I feel like, they're great in the studio. I can put them in with a ton of producers because they're a songwriter. I could do this, and I'll start to see like what moves I can make with them if they were signed to me and signed to Primary Wave. And so if I feel like I can already make move A, B, and C with you, then that to me is like a great signing.
Yeah. And as a follow-up to what Ritch was asking you earlier, as an executive in this business, how important is the fostering of relationships?
I think it's everything. It's a really small business. Fostering relationships is, it's like sharpening your saw. It's every day. And, keeping those relationships too. So people that I did deals with 5 years ago pop back up and have like the hottest thing in the game. And so you're like, oh my God, I know them from 5 years ago in this thing. And that's so valuable. So just staying out there and not behind your computer is really, really important.
I'm so glad you said that because, developing those relationships and not staying behind your computer. This is what I'm always encouraging my students to do, is to get out and network, get out and meet people, because we're an industry, like you just pointed out, that we're in an industry where people want to work with people who they like and who they know, rather than just, an anonymous email. I think we're also, hit on every single day with information and with people reaching out, but it's not the same as when we get something from a trusted source or the kinds of relationships you were talking about fostering.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, a trusted source to me means someone that, if they're pitching me an idea or something that I know that they have follow-ups to this, or I know they're bringing me something that like I'm not just putting all my weight on, that they're putting some of their weight on too. And so that always means more.
After this stint or time that you did at Primary Wave, you came out to California, but your next move was you were Senior VP of Creative with RedOne. at his company, 2101. Did you have many professional contacts or relationships in the music business in Los Angeles at the time that you took that gig?
Yes, because pretty much everybody in New York had moved to Los Angeles by that time. So yeah,
right.
Yeah, I knew a lot of people in Los Angeles, probably more than New York, and I probably should have moved even sooner than I did, to be honest. I just exponentially grew within my career when I moved to Los Angeles, and it's the epicenter of songwriting for the world, I feel. And working with RedOne was just incredible. His story is incredible, from sleeping on an air mattress to being the number one producer in the world at that time. And being a part of his team was just such an honor. And learning from Alan Molina and RedOne and everything that they had built, they had a huge roster. So it was a lot to, swallow and learn about and dive into, and a lot of writers to meet and see. And we ultimately did an acquisition deal with Olay for that roster of writers.
Were the industry relationships that you were forging then easier, considering that you were working with one of the biggest and most successful songwriter producers in the business?
I mean, in the music industry, you're either being pitched or you're pitching at any given moment. I try to position myself as the one that's being pitched to as much as possible. So I will take a position on and then be like, how am I going to get pitched in this situation? How can I go through this job on a daily basis and not have to be pitching all day? So there were a lot of unknown writers signed to RedOne, but RedOne was who he was. He had from Starships with Nicki Minaj to On the Floor with J-Lo, her biggest hit, with, all of Lady Gaga, all of One Direction. So it was using that and formulating a strategy that helped me a lot.
Following your job, Tiffany, with RedOne, you then left music publishing completely, and you went to work for Spotify as the global head of songwriting relations. Two-part question to you. What did your job entail, and what were your greatest challenges in that particular job?
So really quickly, because that transition between RedOne and Spotify was probably one of my most difficult transitions, even more difficult than Spotify to me launching my own company. And it was because at that moment, I was on a 2-year contract with RedOne, and we finished that deal. And knowing that you're on a 2-year contract, you would think, okay, well, you can get the next thing completely set up. But looking at the landscape of the music industry, nothing was inspiring me. Nothing was making me want to get out of bed every day and bust my ass to do it. I just was like, okay, none of these publishing jobs. Okay, so I'm going to sign a bunch of writers and do the same thing. And so it was really it was a difficult time for me, creatively, to grasp of what my next move was going to be. And then I read an article that Troy Carter was going to Spotify. And at this time, people were migrating to Spotify, not at the rate that they ended up doing in the years following, but 3.5 years ago at this time, I didn't know what the role was. Songwriters hated Spotify. It was going to the other side, but I still wanted to take this meeting with Troy because I just think he's so brilliant. Always did, always will. And so I campaigned for that position. I hit up everybody that knew Troy. I met with Troy. I did not know what the role was. I did not know it was even songwriter related. I just was bring me into Spotify. I will I will strategize this with you. And so he said the role is global head of songwriter and producer relations. And I was like, okay, I'm perfect for this role. I was a songwriter. I understand songwriting inside and out, and I understand publishing. And once I started the role, it was difficult to figure out the direction of the department, because we had to hire, we had to create budgets, we had to create programs, we had to do all these things. But okay, but for what? What are we doing? What is this department? So we had to establish that we had to build a bridge with songwriters and producers the same way that the artist departments were doing for the artists and the labels, incredible marketing plans. They were doing the billboards, and they were doing playlisting and events and fans first events and things like that. And so step one was figuring out a program to build that. And so that's when I came up with Secret Genius. And that it started off with okay, it'll be a playlisting all the songs by the same songwriter. It'll be a podcast. And then it was an existing podcast. And then so we made it a playlist. And then we opened up 4 studios globally, and they were free for writers and producers to apply to use. We did songwriting camps all around the world, from Norway, London, Miami, Nashville, several in LA. And we had an ambassador list where every year we would name a list of 10 songwriters and producers that were super inspiring, at the top of the Billboard chart, and that we would be working with throughout the year. So, in creating all of that, we established what the songwriter relations department was going to be for Spotify.
Did you, obviously in listening to you, it was a lot of extensive work in terms of developing strong relationships with the songwriter community. Did you get the sense that there was a real commitment corporately from Daniel and Troy and so forth to this particular community, like there was with the artists? Was that the sense that you were getting, or was there, I guess I'm just trying to get, because, where we're going with this is, I guess I'm just sort of surprised at the way it all ended up. But what was your sense while you were there?
I'm surprised how it all ended up too, quite frankly. Troy is the most supportive boss I've ever had. So we were able to move things. If you think about it, all the things I just mentioned, the recording studios, an award show with like Max Martin, Timbaland, and Quincy Jones attending. And we had Rick Rubin our first year. It's like, we did an amazing job bringing the community together, and we couldn't have done that without Spotify support. So, to answer your question, the proof was in the pudding that I was able to unlock budgets, that I was able to do a billboard of James Fauntleroy and Ali Tamposi and Boy Wonder and, London on the track. And so we were able to do all these things. I was surprised. I was surprised as well. I think 3 months, after I departed Spotify, there were decisions that were made, as well. So, but as far as I was there and I was able to fight internally to get the budgets that we needed. We were able to support songwriters in the best way that we could.
And let me ask you, Tiffany, were you surprised at the challenging of the 44% royalty increase for songwriters?
I was surprised.
At their challenging?
I was surprised. Yeah. Yes, I was surprised. That was surprising. Blown away.
Yeah, especially considering, it's an interesting question hearing Eric say that, because what's surprising about it is listening to all of the initiatives and all of the things that you were able to unlock and create with the songwriting community at Spotify. There seemed to be such a huge amount of time, energy, commitment, and focus on your part, on the company's part, toward that particular aspect of the business. Like you mentioned, along with artists, who had that kind of focus and orientation with the playlists and so forth. And what you were able to do on the songwriting side with Genius and with all of those other things, I think it not only surprised, you, but it surprised and shocked the industry that would be such a turnaround, given the behavior and the commitment and all of the things that were being done previous to that.
Yeah, a couple things, and I'm just speculating here, but Troy Carter had left at that point. I had left at that point. And it's a huge company. I don't know. There's more than 4,000 people that work there in so many different departments. And, I was a department of 8. Troy was a larger department in which my department sat. But there's other things that happen on the other side of the company, So, at the end of the day, it completely surprised us both.
Tiffany, you've just launched a brand new company, Beat House, as a joint venture with Pulse Music. Can you tell us what the inspiration was to form this company at this particular time, and what your vision is for it in the new era that we're in today?
Yeah, Beat House. Truly, truly excited about this new venture. I knew that I needed a dope name, so came up with what I think is a dope name, Beat House. I feel like branding is super important, and an important aspect of creating an ecosystem, which is what Beat House is. My opinion is that traditional A&R doesn't work. What I mean by that is solely pitching songs and setting up sessions if you're a publisher, even as a record label A&R, just like the traditional scouting and signing and promotion. None of that, I think, works without creating more of an ecosystem, more branding, different marketing initiatives, digital, of course. And so within Beat House, we're building it brick by brick with a pretty large joint venture with Pulse on the publishing side, which I'm really excited. And I think they completely understand our stance on traditional A&R, and which I felt like was really aligned with our thought process. We have a client that's the largest organization in the country for criminal justice reform called the Alliance for Safety and Justice. And they're the largest in that they've passed the most bills to release the most people from prison and put that money into our communities. What Beat House does is feed celebrities to their campaigns across the country. So in California, we've worked with G-Eazy and Ty Dolla $ign, and in Chicago with Vic Mensa and G Herbo, and we're just getting started across the country. We have a television show in development with writers and producers. We have management and a record label in the works. So all these different aspects, and I also A&R Pitbull. And so we A&R different projects. And so all these different aspects of the company really work well together in an ecosystem. The clients that I work with on the criminal justice reform side, it only helps our publishing business or what we're building, with management or the record label.
It's so interesting listening to what your vision is for the company and what you're doing, because it speaks to a reality that, I've been in the business for about 40 years now. And one of the most fascinating aspects that I see is that, as I came up in the business, a label was a very, very clear and distinct thing from a music publisher, which was a very, very clear thing from music management, which was very, very clear from, branding and from other kinds of organizations. And it's fascinating that all of these walls, for the most part, have broken down. And, I remember an interview a couple of years ago that Hartwig Mausch, who's the chairman of BMG, gave, where he talked about why the new BMG was formed. And he said, because we realized a long time ago that, where the business was going and what the needs of the music industry were. He said, it no longer cost the cost of a home to make a record. That was the easy part. We could do that very inexpensively. What wasn't easy was getting people's attention to focus on the music. And what the needs of the business were going to be micro needs. And he said, I saw, and this is going back to like 2010, 11. He said, what I saw, and he was talking about the formation of BMG a couple years earlier, the new BMG, is exactly what you were just saying, Tiffany, which is that he saw a collapse between traditional music publishers and labels, that, the twain, that it's not this, two separate roads anymore. And the vision that you seem to have articulated for Beat House seems to confirm that in the marketplace today, where you're very much a part of, as you put it, an ecosystem involved in all areas of the music business, which is really, really fascinating. And obviously one that's even totally different from when you started in the business.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, in the last 15 years, it's changed drastically where the walls are down and, traditional A&R doesn't work, and you've got to create that ecosystem, whatever it is for your company. For me, it was feeding celebrities to criminal justice reform and creating an unscripted television show. For others, they're doing other, community events and, like promoting parties, or like it could be a bunch of stuff, touring. But I think the walls are down, and so it's got to be more of an ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Tiffany, keeping with Rich's previous question regarding the joint venture with Pulse, what was it about Pulse that made them the right partner for you and Beat House?
I think number one was the people. It's Josh Abraham and Scott Cutler for sure. I also am a huge fan of Maria Egan. And I think also being that my history is with independent publishers. I've never worked at a major publisher. Yes, I'm signed to Universal and still am, but outside of that, I understand the independent publisher world. It's just so different. And I knew that I was going to be able to be more malleable with the deals and creative with the agreements, actually, and move at the pace I wanted to move at, and that they would understand that we wanted to do more than just pitch songs and set up sessions. So, I think Pulse is all about that. And I was really excited when they were interested in doing the deal with us.
You said something very interesting, which I'd like to follow up with you on, which is, you come from a major publisher background in the sense that you were signed and still are, I believe, as a writer to a major publisher. Can you speak to why you made a professional decision not to work with a major publisher as opposed to indies? Because that's a very distinct kind of path that you've chosen to follow.
Yeah, really, really, if I'm really, really honest with myself, I think when I was a young writer and had something to prove to my family and my friends after struggling for so long, it was really nice to be like, I signed to Universal and be really excited about that. Versus like I signed to this like independent publisher name, and that's how I felt when I was super young. I think now, like having the knowledge that I do about the music industry and about publishing, again, I just was such a small fish in a big pond, right? There were massive writers signed to Universal and artists, and I definitely got lost in the shuffle, and I needed more time with my publisher and, all the above with all those kind of things that writers speak about. So, I just understand the independent publisher game. Like you can only sign a certain amount of things a year. So you're looking super hard at them. And then once they're signed, you're going to fight for them because that's your only choice, and I just I really wanted to do that with Beat House.
Hey, Insiders, we hope that you've been enjoying our featured interview. Stay tuned because we've got so much more value coming your way. But before we dive back in, a word from our sponsor. Hey, Ritch, you're the founder, CEO, legend of Music Business Registry. Tell us what the Music Business Registry is all about.
Well, what it's about, Eric, is it's a company that is designed to provide the most accurate and up-to-date contact information for the music business. So if someone is looking to reach the A&R community, if someone is looking to reach music publishers, if someone needs to reach artist managers, if someone needs to reach music attorneys, if someone's looking to place their music into film and television and needs to reach all the music supervisors, that's the contact information that we provide. We've been doing it for 28 years. We're sort of the industry standard, if you will, for the music business and have been serving them since 1992. So that's what we do.
Amazing. So if I wanted to find out, let's say A&R people from Warner Brothers, let's say, I can just go in there and find that in the A&R registry?
Absolutely. You'll find all of the Warner Brothers in there. You'll find the Warner Brothers in LA, Warner Brothers in New York, Warner Brothers in Nashville, Warner Brothers in London, Warner Brothers, probably in Australia as well. So those are the main territories that we cover.
Amazing. And we're offering all of our insiders right now that are listening, if you visit musicregistry.com and use coupon code MUBUTV10 at checkout, you'll get a 10% discount off your first order. That's musicregistry.com, coupon code MUBUTV10. Anything else you want to say, Ritch?
Well, when you're ready to put your music to work, musicregistry.com. It's interesting. It makes me realize, that they're in reality, the reality of what you're saying and what you personally have experienced both professionally and creatively, there really is two different criterias for, what a Universal will sign and what a independent like, Primary Waiver or Cobalt will sign. And one of the things you articulated was the time and energy needed to spend with your publisher. And it's almost like, if you want to get into that game of, the big Universal kind of publishing, you better be prepared to do a lot of work on your own, because that kind of individual attention, and it's not only Universal, it's probably all of the big giant publishers, it just isn't there to the degree that it is with independent publishers, I would think.
Right. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think it's a case-by-case basis for sure, but the blueprint of it is that independents are signing less, right? So they have smaller rosters. There's, the ratio of A&R to writers and producers is better for writers that need more attention.
Precisely, or more development or more, relationship building and so forth. Tiffany, I want to get into now your own personal criteria. What is it for, the signing of an artist or a songwriter or a producer to Beat House? What is that criteria for you? And can you also discuss how that criteria has evolved for you over the last, 5-10 years?
I think Beat House definitely has something to prove because we're brand new and we need to come with writers and producers that the industry is excited about. So again, if I'm looking at a new signing, I'm going to want to make sure that I have move A, move B, and move C already situated in my head, that I know those first three moves can happen with that writer. And so that's confidence for me to be able to sign them. And also that it speaks volumes if I'm like, okay, I'm ready to play this writer's songs for this manager or this record label or this artist to get them in with that. And so that's really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for like writers that I can just like go to bat for. And we want to keep it like Soho House, like a little prestigious, a little exclusive in that way that like when you're coming to Beat House, you're getting all hands on deck.
Yeah, it's I hear what you're saying, and I couldn't agree more, and I think that that's a great criteria. I'd like to speak to the other side of that, because I think you and I both know and have enough experience to realize that when you can get behind a writer and feel the way that you just said that you want to feel about playing those songs, there's also a side of it that's non-creative. There's also a side of it that has to do with who these people are. Can you discuss the non-creative elements that you look for in talent that you want to work for? And what I mean by that, Tiffany, is you don't have to name names, but I know you've probably come across situations in your career where you've come across a fabulously talented, amazingly talented person who you love the music and the songs, but for whatever reason, you just say, you know what, this isn't for me. This situation or whatever isn't for me. And generally, I find that those situations have to do with things that are not creative. It's not about the talent, it's about other things. So can you speak to the non-creative qualities and characteristics that you're looking for in people that you're looking to sign? To
give you a completely honest answer here, I actually don't think there is a scenario that I would love someone's music, to that level and then not want to sign them anyway. Like, even if I thought their manager was crazy or like their attorney or whatever, I would try everything to sign them anyway. Even if their personality was like scatterbrained and they weren't showing up for sessions on time, I just don't know. Like, maybe it would have to be super, super drastic of a situation. But like, if I love your music, I'm going to do whatever it takes to sign you and try to get the deal done.
Interesting.
Okay, that is interesting, only because no, seriously, it is, Tiffany, because I've asked renowned A&R people this question before, and they've given me examples where one guy said, he said, I came across this act, I love them, I think someone's going to have a lot of success with them, it just won't be me. And and I said, well, who is this band? And he said, well, it's a band called Jane's Addiction. You're going to be hearing about them. And he felt kind of the opposite that you did. He felt that he felt I can't work with the lead singer and life is too short. So he, even though he loved them and he knew they would have lots of success, he also knew that he wasn't the right person for that particular situation. But it's interesting to hear, because you're one of the very few people I've ever heard say, I would move heaven and earth, even if they were
that we've ever heard
talk about that. So that's very interesting that you would have that belief.
Yeah, from a publishing perspective, of course, for sure. I think management might be a little bit different, but I still kind of stand by saying that. I think we get in the music industry because we love music, and like, give me the headache. I'll take the headache, actually, because, if I love their music, then I'm going to be inspired, and it takes me a lot to get there.
You just said a very interesting thing, which I want to follow up with you on, which is, maybe if it was management, it would be different. Do you have different criterias for what you would take on as a management client versus a publishing client versus a recording artist?
Yeah, I think between being a manager, being a publisher, and, being the record label, you're commissioning differently. So I'm looking at that talent in different ways and how I'm commissioning, right? So if it's a management client and they're a writer that just signed a huge publishing deal somewhere, it's going to be a while before I'm able to get paid from that person. So that might be something that I decline, even though I might like them. But, again, to speak about clients that, maybe someone's like a headache to deal with, or their team or something like that. I think from the management side of things, you're so close. You're like family when you're a manager, depending on how you manage. Yeah. So there could be aspects there where, like, especially me being a female executive, that just doesn't work for me.
You just brought up another interesting term, which I want to follow up with you on. You mentioned the team, with Beat House going into the full spectrum of the music industry. If you're going to sign an artist to Beat House, a recording artist, someone who you're going to be making recordings with and putting those out. How important is an artist team who's coming to you in regard to making that decision? Is that an important factor for you?
It's important if their team is awesome, then that helps. But if their team is weak, I think that we can fill in the gaps there, and we can try to fix the team a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I get it. Okay, great.
Let me ask you, Tiffany, you were involved in the 7% series. Would you tell us what it was?
Sure. This was brought to me by a wonderful female producer named Track Girl, who I adore, and she is a strong advocate for female creatives. I mean, there just aren't enough. And the 7% series was bringing to light the really harsh statistics when it comes to female creatives and looking at Billboard charts and understanding how many songs have female contributors.
In following up on that, you have spoken yourself about the imbalance that exists at the infancy of a song and continues all the way to the charts and festivals and concerts with all male lineups. And my question to you, Tiffany, is, having been involved with that and having been involved in other diversity issues, are we as an industry making progress toward more diversity and inclusion in the business?
I think that we are making strides as an industry in that Maria Egan has her incredible Reboot series. Track Girl has a 7% series. We're speaking on this topic, you and I now. I think there's a long way to go because, what's the solution, right? Until it's at the forefront of everybody's minds during every decision, it's not solved. And, to speak about concert lineups and festival lineups with all men, it's like, well, there was no female available, or they didn't fit the lineup, or there aren't a lot of female rappers, or we couldn't, we had to do a writing camp with all men because there aren't any other female producers. Like, just all of that is excuses to me. In Los Angeles, most of the recording studios employ like all male engineers, right? So at Spotify, when we were doing Secret Genius writing camps, we would pay extra and say, we know you have engineers included in our, rental price of your studio, but we're going to bring in our own female engineers. And I think doing things like that make a difference. And so until we're not just saying, well, this is how it is, and I didn't make it this way, there was no one available or whatever, and just really taking the initiative to change it. I think, until that happens, we're kind of at a standstill.
It's really more about the encouragement. I mean, I'm very heavily involved in the whole educational space, and I've known female producers, Marty Sharon, who's unfortunately no longer with us, Missy Elliott, a lot of very, very talented female executives and engineers and producers and songwriters. And I guess it's much more about bringing a consciousness to this, an awareness that this is going on, so that like you said, it's not just an excuse of well, we couldn't find any, but really making a conscious effort, like you did with the studios, of bringing in,
and that's what I think we're trying to do here on the show too. That's why we're so happy that you decided to do this with us, because one of our big mandates for us is getting a lot of female, executives and, producers, songwriters in the business, and to try to get them to come to talk to us, because we want to expose that more. So, that's why we're really thankful for you doing this for us.
No, I mean, for me, at the beginning of my career, it was like, who do I look up to as a songwriter? It was Makeba Riddick and Esther Dean, and as an executive, it was Jessica Rivera and Ethiopia and Sylvia Rohn. And, while there are those names, there just aren't enough. And so, until as a young female, we don't it's hard to dream when you don't see it in front of you. Like I want to see people that I can aspire to be. And so, I just don't think we have enough of that, enough female producers and even songwriters and engineers and all the above.
Is that something that you're going to be putting a lot of focus on at Beat House?
I put the focus on it throughout my whole life, every aspect of it. So, during Spotify days, during Beat House, yes, in who we sign, in how our roster builds, and how our team grows. I think all of it. who we're taking meetings with. So yes.
And following up with that, what can we as industry professionals be doing to help, create a more gender balanced and diverse business environment today?
I think, as a community, it's having that understanding of each other and our backgrounds, and that, there's a lot stacked up against women executives and female creators, in the studio, in meetings, at our desks, even on emails. It's like, sometimes I feel like I need to put a smiley face after I'm like being harsh on a sentence or an explanation point on something to soften what I'm saying. But, would a man need to do that? Or, then it's like dinner meeting versus a lunch meeting. And it's just at the forefront of everything. And so, if us as the music industry and community can come together and just be more aware and if we're just more equal in our actions, I think we'll make strides.
And, also so many of the female executives today, like you mentioned, Sylvia Rohn, Michelle Jubler over at Capitol, Jessica, like you said, are, Jody Gerson, who I've known for years, are really making very specific efforts to mentor new executives, to mentor new writers, and to mentor, female executives within their own ranks, which I think is also part of the process that you're talking about of coming up and developing the next generation. So like you were saying, so you see yourself, so you can be inspired. So people can aspire to that because they can see themselves as, in other words, they see possibility in that for themselves.
Yeah, and that there's a template or a blueprint for it. Okay, this is how their career went. This is what I can grow up to be, and this is how I can build my career.
Are there any specific books or films that you have found particularly inspirational in your own career that you could tell us about or that you'd recommend?
I loved Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. I think that's a must read for everybody, male or female, but definitely like any woman executive. It's not music industry related, but I also really love Never Eat Alone. I love that. And I love the seven laws of power.
Oh, the 48 laws of power. Yeah.
Is it 48?
That's a great book.
No, wait, hold on. It's 7.
Yeah, it's the 48
hold
laws
on,
of power.
I'm giving you the wrong thing then, because I know there's 7.
Oh, okay.
It's like the 7, like something, the 7 secrets of successful people or something. I don't know. We're gonna have to look that back up later, guys.
Or maybe it's the 7 habits of effective highly people. Is that what the one you're talking about? Maybe
7 habits of highly effective people.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's the Covey book.
Yeah, the Covey book.
Yeah, that's a wonderful
Classic.
book. Definitely.
I mean, people quote it to me all the time, and I quote it to other people.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
It's
I
great.
even quoted it during this interview. I said, sharpen the saw.
Exactly.
Precisely.
That's one of the 7 habits.
Yes, it absolutely is. How do you keep informed? How do you keep aware of what's going on in your business in terms of, the writers or the industry? I mean, are there sources that you read? Is there time that you set aside to keep abreast of what's going on? Is there certain habits or patterns that you integrate into your professional life that help you?
I have my assistant send me weekly the top 20 songs on all the writers and producers on Billboard. There's Instagram accounts that I follow pretty strategically, whether it be like a Complex or Fader, just for that sort of industry news, or if it's just following like Billboard's Instagram feed. And then above it all, I think it's meetings, because that's where I really learn information. So I keep up with people and just check in.
It's interesting hearing you say about the compiling of the songs, and I take it also who wrote and produced them. When I worked at Arista and A&R, Clive Davis had us put together every single week all of the songs that were breaking. They were breakers on R&R, so he could constantly refine his ear, constantly keep abreast of what was going on. But the most interesting thing about what he would do is that anytime a new writer or a songwriter that he didn't know or didn't have a relationship with that he would hear who had a song that would break, he would make a point to reach out to them rather than for him to just to sit back and have them reach out to him. He would reach out to them and want to take a meeting with them precisely for the same reasons that you were talking about. And it was so interesting to hear you speak about that, because I'd only known of maybe, one other executive, which was him when I worked for him, to do that. But it's such an important factor. He always felt it was his job to reach out to those people. I remember when he did that when Diane Warren was, no one in the business. She had no success. She was just having a hit with, I think, Rhythm of the Night, which was her very first song in like the early 80s. And he developed a very, very strong relationship with her, as well as, Billy Steinberg and a lot of other people like that. But it's a very, very important quality that really I felt, helped him. So to hear you say that, I think is interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Super important.
What specific advice do you have for anyone who aspires to have a career running a music company like Beat House?
I think, the music industry is a little bit like the Wild Wild West right now, in that, there's so many things changing. The whole landscape is different now and changes quicker than the changes were before. So it's kind of the best time, because nobody's wrong and nobody's totally right. It's just, you've got to be fearless and jump in. And at the end of the day, it's about the song and the music. And so it's kind of a great time to launch your own venture.
Yeah, it definitely is. Absolutely. Today, what advice would you have for anyone who wants to pursue a career as an artist or a songwriter in today's climate?
The advice that I would have for any aspiring talent would be that, in the digital age of streaming, there's a direct line between your music and the fans. So instead of asking, why am I not being playlisted, or I just don't have the right manager, I don't have the budget, or, any of those excuses, there's a handful of artists, more than a handful, that have, been in their mom's basement and uploaded songs and been able to make a living.
So is it about just looking at those examples?
I think it's knowing that, there's so much possibility as an artist now, and that, your music can be heard, even if you don't have the right connection or you don't live in Los Angeles. And I think...
Yeah, the barriers have been broken.
The walls are down. Put your music out.
Do you feel that, people and artists who want careers today, and, even people who are looking to people like yourself as a female executive who want a career as someone running a company, that educating themselves about the business and about the particular line of work that they want to do is a crucial element? So
I've worn so many different hats in the music industry, as, an intern, as a songwriter, publisher, Spotify, now CEO. I think that it's okay for this to be a jungle gym instead of a ladder, and that, within the music industry, it's all about pivoting. There's so many examples of writers and artists that then moved into the executive side of it. So no matter what, through it all, though, I've always known who the power players were. It's always been really important to know decision makers, talented producers and writers, and really understand them, beyond the Billboard charts. Are they better at lyric or melody, or, what instruments do they play? All those things are really important to absorb if you're an aspiring executive, or if you're an aspiring creative.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you were speaking about that, I was thinking, the classic example of, songwriter who became a successful executive is your own partner, Scott Cutler. I mean, there's a perfect example of that, who built an empire with his company Pulse.
He really did.
Absolutely. Tiffany, I can't thank you enough for doing this with us. I really appreciate it. It's very, very kind of you, and we're very grateful.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you both. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
This was a really interesting one, Eric. The reason I thought it was so interesting is because what we were focusing on here was someone who had a very interesting trajectory in her own professional career. This is somebody who was a songwriter.
Right, exactly.
This was somebody who was signed to Universal and who made a decision at a certain point in her life to go from being a songwriter to being a music publisher, to working on the other side.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that. But that particular journey, I think we sort of captured that particular trajectory for her really, really well in terms of, what she was doing. And I thought this the whole thing, she came from the major
label system,
major label system or the major publisher system when she was with Universal, and how she went about building those relationships, when she left Universal and then went to work at Primary Wave. And I love the way she talked about how her whole thing was about bringing in new writers and producers and a new consciousness to build that particular company. That company had all legacy acts.
Yeah.
That company had Hall & Oates, and they had,
part
pieces
of
Nirvana's catalog, and they were doing very well with that licensing. What they lacked were the new up-and-coming writers that they could get onto projects, the new up-and-coming producers that they could get on even their own recordings and their own clients, which are substantial in the Primary Wave family. And that's what I thought was really good. She brought what they were needing. And I thought that's a very important lesson for our audience, is she didn't just go in there and say, give me a job. I want a job. She identified
the areas that they were lacking in
and said, I will fulfill them.
Exactly.
Absolutely, yes. And that's a very, very important distinction. I just wanted to point that out because I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And I thought that, the whole thing of she's forming a new company now. As she talked about. And she's doing it with Pulse, which is one of the most respected and significant independent music publishing companies in the business. And she talked about how today it's really about creating a new ecosystem.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? It means a system whereby you are developing talent. You're not just shoving things through a system in an assembly line and hoping that, you're
developing and nurturing the talent. You're giving it that full 360 degree. It's like Apple. All of their products are all an ecosystem that fits and serves one thing.
Exactly. As opposed to a system that just, has hundreds and hundreds that go through their system. But as far as personal attention, it's not something that's their strong suit. I know that many of them would disagree, but it's in this particular model, she wants to create an ecosystem. And the most interesting part, Eric, that I thought she had to say was that the traditional A&R model
doesn't work
anymore.
Right.
That whole thing of, signing a band and putting it through and pushing it out, and it just doesn't work anymore. And she is so right. When we look at where are the new artists coming from, whether it's a SoundCloud, all those platforms that we've spoken of over the years.
Right.
That's where the new talent is coming from. Exactly. It's not necessarily coming from major labels. Not that major labels aren't producing artists that succeed. Yes, they are. But there's dozens of other systems that are coming in.
Hybrid models, Cobalt, what they're doing with AWOL.
And fantastic things with people that are having viable careers, earning over $100,000 a year in streaming income alone. And they're people that we have never heard of.
Right.
And that's the important part, because it means, ladies and gentlemen, that the business is moving into a direction that is transforming from, the top-down model where it's all about the big stars and they're the only ones who can make money and have a living, to where, unknowns can make very, very, very healthy livings. And I thought that was a very significant part of that.
And one of the other points that I thought was really well stated was about indie versus major publisher. Why did she make that choice to go with an indie publisher?
Yeah.
And, one of the things that you were alluding to earlier about needing more time and attention and, trying to do that developing and signing a certain amount of acts each year and all that kind of stuff, So.
Precisely. And she talked about the vision she had for her company.
Right.
She talked about the vision that she had and how supportive Pulse was for that, in terms of supporting that kind of consciousness.
Right.
Because today, it's not about signing up everything.
Right.
There's just too much. But the point I loved about what she said is, what you do sign, you gotta work.
Right.
You gotta work.
So whatever you have those decisions made, you gotta live by those.
Absolutely. It's not like you have 50 others that, hopefully some of those will happen for you. No, this is the artist. This is who I'm going to give my time, energy, and commitment to. And often that is one of the major differences between big labels and smaller boutique situations like what Tiffany is running.
Right.
Where they just need to have a hit. Could be you, could be you, could be you, could be you. Versus, no, this is my artist, and we're really going to take the time, the energy, and really work and develop this from the beginning. We're not going to rely on someone else. Even if we have distribution through a big company,
exactly,
we're going to be the ones calling the shots creatively and the direction for that artist.
Yeah, and one of the final points, which I know that kind of hit home with you, was what we can do as an industry to help create a more gender balanced and diverse, business environment. And I think she was talking about, community and understanding each other, and that there's a lot of stacked up against women. Let's face it, with even today in this day and age of the Me Too movement, there's still that gender inequality happening.
Absolutely. And, and I just thought that the whole thing of what she said that really struck me was, we need to develop from the ground up. We need to develop a stronger consciousness. You need to be aware of that in not only companies, but in co-writing sessions. You need to be aware of that in meetings. You need to be aware of that. You need to develop a stronger consciousness. That, to me, is the only way that this is ever going to change. And we have to never, ever forget that.
Hey Insiders, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate it. To get show notes, links, and everything that was mentioned during this interview, head on over to our official website at MUBUTV.com/podcast/show notes. If you're enjoying the content and what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. And don't forget to rate and review our show over at iTunes. 5-star reviews are always welcome and help to ensure that our podcast stands out on the top rated and new and noteworthy charts on iTunes in our space. You can also find us on social media at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all ending with the handle MUBUTV, which is spelled MUBUTV. Don't forget to catch our flagship show, the MUBUTV Insider Video Series, airing every week on YouTube at youtube.com/MUBUTV. This show was produced and created by Ritch, Esra, and Eric Knight. This show would not be here if it weren't for our amazing team, which are the following: interview editors Sarah Nissenbaum and Alex Taylor, show notes and transcriptions by Jani Chang, Nicole Capodoglo, Lilia Owens, and Sarah Nissenbaum, theme music by Disciples of Babylon, and be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the MUBUTV Insider Podcast.